Okay, so good evening, everyone, in person and those who are on the Zoom. Again, thank you for joining. Again, we will start with a short breathing, mindful meditation for a few moments.
I see what's. Don't be sick.
Then you can try to contemplate and feel without liberating ourselves from the samsara. We can have temporary relief here and there, but there's no way that we can have lasting, permanent relief. Something keeps happening again and again. Some problem, suffering, continue to manifest again and again. Some smaller, some bigger, but suffering problem seems never end. And the only way to free ourselves from the samsara completely is by eliminating those negative afflictive emotions and the contaminated karma created due to those afflictive emotions. And in order to eliminate those disturbing negative emotions, then we have to cut the very root of all those negative emotions and delusions. That is the fundamental ignorance. To cut that fundamental ignorance, then we need to develop the wisdom, the special insight. Wisdom relies on emptiness. And for that, we need to contemplate, meditate, and practice. And not only just to free ourselves, but in order to free each and every sentient beings from all their suffering and cause of suffering, I must achieve fully awakened state. And to achieve that fully awakened state, I must cultivate the bodhicitta mind, And to be able to generate both in the mind, I also need to cultivate the pure renunciations. Short, I need to cultivate the three principal aspects of power within my mind stream. And for that, I need to meditate, contemplate, and practice correctly, continuously. And for that, I need to be reminded of that. And for that very reason, I'm going to listen to the teacher. Okay.
For our opening prayer, we'll do the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha 3 times in English. Founder, the endowed and extended the children, the one found out in the federal children, effective fully with him all the children to the fountain.
Completely perfected, fully, perfectly. To you, completely and fully awakening. Take the destroy the settle for the second clean. You promise to be friends for refuge.
To the fountain,
The one bit
the full
system.
the
Completely perfected for the fighting. So the base facing to you to you completely for the sunset that is the beautiful
short mandala offering once in Tibetan. Saji. Shin. Yeah. So. Show Idam. On the next page, refuge in bodhicitta, once in English, twice in Tibetan. I go for refuge until I realize to do that. May
So within this subject of the three principal aspects of the path to enlightenment, the first principal aspect of the path, the pure renunciation, and within that, why we need to cultivate the pure renunciations, and then how to generate the renounced mind, and within that, how to reverse the clinging attachment to the appearance of pleasure of this life, and how to reverse the clinging and attachment to the pleasure of future lives. So within that, then we're reversing the clinging and grasping and attachment to the appearance of future life, the pleasure of future lives. And in order to reverse that, then meditating on karma, law of cause and effect, and meditating on the nature of sufferings. So I think that is where, and I think just to read, I don't want we read before. Yeah, I think second last verses where it says, if you think, the first page, if you think again and again about the actions and their inevitable effect, that is the karma, and the suffering of cyclic existence of the samsara, emphasize on appearance future life will be reversed. So we talked about a little bit about the karma last week, and today we can talk about the second, meditating and contemplating on the suffering of the samsara or cyclic existence. And again, in that understanding the nature of the sufferings of the samsara is very crucial. And that is the first teaching that Buddha gave after enlightenment, Four Noble Truths. Within the Four Noble Truths, then he gave the teaching on the truth of the noble truth of sufferings. If you don't understand what is really sufferings, then you will not understand and try to find out what is the cause of that sufferings. If you don't understand and find out what is the cause of that suffering, you will not try to get rid of that cause that led you to sufferings. If you don't do that, there is no way of cessation or freedom from that sufferings. And in order to find that cessation or freedom from that suffering permanently, then it doesn't come from just wishing it. You have to put the practice, and that is engaging in the Eightfold Path, the Noble Path. So that is where the Four Noble Truths comes. So here is meditating on first ones, the suffering of samsara. And in order to understand the nature of samsara, in many scriptures, they explain to the point of view 8 types of suffering, 6 types of sufferings, 3 types of sufferings, the way to understand suffering by kind of categorizing different categories. Of course, there is endless sufferings. If you try to think each one suffering, probably, we cannot remember it too much. So, but some of those scholars and masters is that they kind of categorize in those different sections of sufferings, and through that, in terms of its type of sufferings, as long as we have this samsaric human life, as long as we have this samsaric human rebirth, first there's suffering of birth. When the child, from the conceptions in the mother's womb, during the 9 months, or a little bit less or a little bit more, is one way is great that we don't have such a great memory what goes to that child. You can imagine yourself sitting like that in a very small area, dark. Even for a few seconds, how do we feel now? That is how the child, for so many months, is like that. Imagine when it's like you are almost flooded by oceans or whatever, when you move, the mother moves, going up and downs, So, and then when the child, and of course, it affects what mothers eat, can have an effect on their child, different food, how they moved. So, the child, and then once it comes out in the world, maybe nowadays, maybe it's a little bit more easier because there's more better technologies, more safeties in a way. But especially like when you think of natural death, natural birth, trying to pull it, push it. You can imagine you are stuck there and someone pulling this way, pushing that way. And when it's so small and so fragile, even if I was not so fragile compared to that at this moment, when someone's pushing you in that way, and in some places you are not familiar, I don't know how the child feels being in that darkness for all this year, and then suddenly so much light, all of that. And then in some sutras and scripture, mentions, for the child, even you have the most soft warm cloth to keep the child. For that, they might even feel harsh, even that softness, because of the body is such a fragile at that moment. A lot of time you can see the child crying. They cry because of those pains. So there's suffering of birth. If you think each time we go through the birth, sometimes not having great memory is an advantage. Sometimes we think, oh, I wish I would have such a great memory like someone has. Well, sometimes if we have all the memory of that. So anyway, the only things we don't have those memories, all the pain, suffering that we go through that. And as we grow up from the birth, child, teenagers, adult, and slowly, grow. You are lucky enough, fortunate we live up to certain age, 70, 80, 90s, and then it comes the suffering of what we call aging. And once you started aging, once you started reaching certain point of your age, for a lot of people, every day when they wake up, something feeling not right, something's hurting, not easy, your body become more weak, more vulnerable, not as strong as before. Your mind is not as sharp as before. Your memory is not sharp as before, And as in some scripture describe, your hair started to turn like a white flowers. Mine is already started. Luckily, I don't have too many hair left. What it was left is already turned white. Wrinkles, and we don't want to see that. That is why you colors. That's why the people try to fix the wrinkles, because they don't want to have that. They don't want to see that. That means there is a suffering. When they see the wrinkle, there's suffering, pain. I don't want to have that, but I can see that coming. I don't want to lose my hair. The hair is losing. I don't want to see my hair white, but it's becoming white. And that's why we try to fix those things. Why? Because we don't want to be in that. And we don't want to be that, and when it happens, it's a suffering. You are experiencing something you don't want to be. And then, in some cases, as it says, when you sit down, it's like putting big load, boom, like that, I saw that. Of course, it is. We are not saying everyone has that, but it happens to a lot. My mom, she has a very hard time sitting, very hard time getting up. Get up, she has to use everything. Her legs, hands, even with them, there's a lot of struggles. Sitting down, you cannot just sit with the balance, you just. So again, with the medical technologies and all these things, it does have to improve some, but not everyone had that access. Even with those access, still there is certain level of struggles. When you are in that age, you cannot sit and get up like that you used to do when you were young. There is still some sort of struggles, but again, so yeah, the suffering of aging, that which in many cultures they try to avoid thinking, talking about it. This, you are fighting against fact and reality. That's a natural process, fact, that we all have to go through. As long as you are taking this samsara birth, you cannot escape that. Something you cannot escape is better to think now. Talk about this, contemplate about it, and be more accepting and more dignified. Just being accepting and being okay with being that. There's nothing wrong with being that. That's the way natural process. You don't have to feel shame or bad about being old. There's nothing to be ashamed about being of course, there's those struggles, physical, emotional struggles, the sufferings, but This all a part of that natural process. You know, there's nothing to reject. There's nothing to deny. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You know. And then with the aging, after that, then the suffering of death, which we all are very scared of. You know. Again, once you are born in the samsara, no one can escape the death. If you are free from the samsara, then you don't have to go through all of this. But as long as we are in samsara, we cannot escape those sufferings. You have to experience that sufferings of death as long as we are this samsaric human rebirth. With the death, of course, if someone has prepared well, someone has practiced their life well, they're prepared well, it might not be as fearful, as scary at time of death, but someone who is not well prepared, then it can be very fearful, very scary. When the time comes, you know, a lot of emotions can arise, a lot of feelings, emotion can arise. Some of them that you don't even expect them to arise in those situations. You know, regret is sometimes you can have flashes of your whole life, and when you remember about those bad things we might have done and that we have not been kind of deal with that, it can lead to a lot of regret, a lot of guilt, a lot of bitterness, a lot of frustrations, a lot of angers, all these different feelings, a lot of confusions, you know, not knowing what is happening, not knowing what is going to happen, not knowing what's happening, not knowing what is going to happen, not knowing what is there after that. All kind of those different feelings, you know, emotions, whether you believe in reincarnations or whether you don't believe in reincarnations, still those confusions can arise for everyone in that moment, you know, unless someone has a really very unshakable, strong practice. You know, if someone has a strong practice and they're prepared, then they don't have to go through so much fear like ordinary normal people go through, you know, who are so, and then, you know, and if you have attachment to a lot of things, even more problem at the time of death, you know. You are so attached to your families or your loved ones. It could be family, it could be friend, it could be your animals, and you don't want to be separated from them. You don't want to lose them. But you know you are facing death and you are going to lose them. You are going to be separated, and that makes you so painful. That makes you so painful. The more stronger attachment you have, the more stronger painful it is. Less attachment you have, less painful it is. Same, not only with the beings, it could be also, you know, your reputations, your fame, your existence, you know, your wealth, you know, all of that. For example, if you are too attached to yourself or your existence, again, fear of losing that existence, you know. The so-called Dishishara, who I'm not as Dishishara, I'm attached to that now. I know that that is going to be disappear. It's going to go, and you don't want to lose that existence and that signification that you feel about yourself. Again, there's pain and suffering related to that, you know. Attachment to your wealth, whatever that is, the fear, you know, what is going to happen to them, you know, or others whom you might have lead the will or whatever to take, and will they take it well or not? Will they fulfill your needs or not? Will they follow your advice or all? Again, you know, so many fears, so many ways could arise at that moment. So much confusions and so much pain and struggles one could go. Of course, it's a different if someone has strong practice and have prepared well. You know, not everyone has to go through that. It doesn't have to be that, but it depends on individuals. So still, whatever, you know, everyone has to face that suffering of death to certain levels, you know. You have to face that, even you don't want, you know, the suffering of. And while you are from the birth until death, how many even lifespan you have, suffering of sickness. For some people, they have to deal with chronic illness for all their life. Born with certain chronic illness, they die with that chronic illness. You know, some they were not born with such chronic illness, but later in their life, they have such chronic illness, you know, for many, many years or decades. For some, they might not have that kind of chronic or terminal illness, but still we encounter many different physical health issues, from more serious to minor, again and again. You know, minor, for example, you know, allergy problems, you know, not serious, but minor that make very uncomfortable, you know, could have many different side effects, different people's, flu, cold. Those are very kind of minor, but still, in some cases, they can be serious too, you know, depending on individuals' conditions and other things as well. And then sometimes we have stomach problem, sometimes we have fever, sometimes we have headaches, sometimes we fall down, sometimes we have problem with our muscles, vein here and there. If we can ask anyone in this world throughout the beginning of human existence until now, is there anyone who hasn't experienced any kind of illness? There wouldn't be anyone. Some had more illness, some had less. Some had more serious illness, some of this minor illness. But everyone, as far as I know, my friends, families, relatives, that I know, the monks that are grown in different monasteries, I don't know anyone who didn't have some illness in their life. You go through certain health issues at a certain point and you get cure, relief, some, you know, and then again, after some time, you have certain, again, another health issue, challenges. It might be very minor, but still, whether it's a major or minor, it's still illness, suffering that you don't want. It is something uncomfortable. It's something very discomfort. That is sufferings, the suffering of illness or the sickness. the suffering of facing, whether it's beings or whether it's experiences, whether it's a situation that you don't want to face. Do you get it? There are certain situations you don't want to encounter. There are certain experiences you don't want to encounter. There are certain beings you don't want to see them or encounter. You try to avoid all of them, if possible. Despite you trying to avoid them, sometimes you cannot avoid them. It comes in face of you. You know, you encounter them. You don't want to encounter, you don't want to experience, but you encounter, and that becomes suffering and pain. You know, different situations, different beings, different experiences. You know,
Ask Stella to mute herself.
who?
Stella. Ask Stella to mute.
Stella. Why who? Stella who? Yeah.
Laura, I'm sorry. Laura.
Hello, Laura. Can you
Hello?
unmute? Can you mute? Yeah, we hear. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, it's okay now. Yeah, thank you. Good.
Sorry, Stella.
Oh my God, you were okay, now I'm mute. What did I do now?
And then suffering of not finding that one, not the sufferings of not being able to accomplish, achieving, or to get what you want to get. That is one of the biggest suffering we all have. Especially human beings known as desirants. Human beings is known as a desirants. And among the delusions, desire is the main predominating in human realms. And because of that, we human beings have too much desire. Too much desire. And because we human beings have too much desire, there's too many things we want to get. There's too many things we want to achieve. There's too many things we want to accomplish. It's almost, there's no end to that. When you achieve something, you want to achieve another one. When you achieve that one, you want to achieve something. You want to accomplish something. There's no end to that. And due to that, you know, there's always something not being able to achieve, something that you want to achieve that you have not been able to achieve. There's always something, there is something that you want to accomplish, you are not even able to accomplish. That's suffering. And you can see, of course, the example I'm giving is a little bit kind of, you know, what you call strong, but it's a little bit too strong, but that will give you a little bit kind of, that can be in a even more stronger versions for some, you know, gentle, lighter version, but same, you know, people who climb, let's say Mount Everest or other things, they want to create world record. And they are willing to do everything, you know. And sometimes they lose their life, you know. Or sometimes even they don't lose their life, you know. They can have a damage. And then that world record broken by someone. Now they want to break that one. It keep on going, you know. It's keep on happening all the time. And that's what it is, you know. I don't know what is the record now for the oldest person to climb. I think it might be 80, I don't remember, 80 something. Before it used to be one Japanese, and then it was broken one Nepali, and then it was broken by, I don't know, the Japanese someone. And this Nepali man whose record was broken, he wanted to regain his record. I think he was, I don't know, 84 or between 81 and 84. I don't remember exactly, Chechen. And then he died. He died trying to climb. Yeah, he was trying to regain his. So that is just one example. Of course, what I'm giving the extreme example, but that's, never end. So the suffering. So when someone broke your record, you suffer. And now you want to regain your record or have record, and then there is a suffering of not being able to achieve it, and trying to achieve in the process. Not only achieve it, sometimes you lose even your life, and so that is, the suffering nature. And again, it's hard for us to say, I have had enough, I have achieved enough, I have accomplished enough, and be happy and content. Always, when you have achieved something, when you accomplish something, still you feel like I haven't accomplished much, I haven't achieved much. I need to do that, I need to accomplish, I need to achieve. Kind of, there's no end to that desire. And due to that desire, then there's the sufferings. Due to that endless desire, there's the sufferings. And then this very aggregate, this very aggregate, which is the result of contaminated karma and delusion, is the very base and very root of the suffering of birth, suffering of sickness, suffering of aging, suffering of death. If we don't have such physical aggregates or such aggregate, if we have a light body, say, example, just to give, if you have a light body, for example, then you don't need to eat, you don't need to drink, you don't need to get sick because of a lot of time, food, waters. You don't need to get old in the way you described, So, but because we have such aggregates that result of that become basis for the other suffering to arise. So it's important to contemplate, meditate, and come to deep understanding that, as long as I have such contaminated aggregate, which is the result of the delusion and karma, there's always going to be suffering. There's no end to the sufferings. The only way to end suffering permanently is to get rid of such aggregates. In order to get rid of such aggregate, then you need to get rid of the cause that give to such aggregates. And that means getting rid of the contaminated karma and the delusions. So that is the and then in terms of meditations, if we talk about, also the concept of the suffering, three types of suffering of pain, suffering of change, suffering of all pervasive, compounding, pervasive. Suffering or pain, we don't have to meditate so much to understand it's a suffering. Suffering or pain is when you are sick, when you have health issues, when you have emotional issues, when your mind is not in good state, your mind is that, when it's too hot, when it's too cold, when you are starving, when you are suffering because of the thirsty, because you couldn't find water, liquid, whatever, those are suffering or pain. And that we understand all the suffering and we all try to avoid that. Understanding that as a suffering is not so extremely difficult. You don't need to meditate, contemplate so much. Maybe if we can, I don't know, either have fan or open, it seems a little bit too much because to study and no air movement. Yeah.
If we have both doors open, it creates a wind. Is it too much there?
But I think the rain stopped, so it may not be.
Not the cold, but it gets windy and the doors start slamming.
So suffering of pain, it might not be so difficult to understand as a suffering, something you don't want, something you want to avoid. It is one of the great Tibetan master, Panchen Losang Chökyi, one of the Panchen Lama. He mentioned even the animal can recognize that pain as a pain, that suffering as a suffering. They also try to avoid that. Isn't it? The suffering from the hunger, starvations, thirsty. The suffering from too much heat, too much cold. The suffering from wounds, being attacked by someone's, eaten by someone's. Those gross sufferings, which you call suffering or pain. Those understanding that as a suffering is not too difficult. As I mentioned, as the Panchen Lama, even the animal can recognize that and they try to avoid it. And they have a way to trying to avoid and escape as much as possible. Next one is called suffering of change. That is where we struggle to see it as a suffering. We don't see this as a suffering. We don't recognize it as a suffering. Because we see them as, instead of suffering, we see them as a pleasure, happiness. When it's too hot, you turn the air conditions, the breeze, the coolness. It gives you some kind of relief, pleasant feeling, joy. That is what. You don't think that is the suffering. Previously, when it's too hot, you think that is suffering. Now, when you turn the air condition and when it started to get cool, you feel good, nice. And you don't think that is suffering. You think that is the happiness. And that could be the other way around. When it's too cold, you feel the pain, suffering, or too cold. You turn the heater or make a fire, it heat up, and you feel warm, very nice. And then you don't think that is a suffering. We don't think that is suffering. We think that is a joy, happiness, pleasant feeling. These are the things that we try to achieve. we're attached to. Same. When you are hungry, you eat some things, it gives you some kind of satisfaction, some joy at the very beginning. You don't think that it's suffering. When you have been jogging, running, hiking for a long time, you feel tired, you sit, rest, sense of peace, sense of less tired, resting, you feel that is the joy. You don't feel that's the suffering. If we let think of all different happiness, pleasure, that we think all are like that. What the Buddha says is even those are sufferings. What we call they are contaminated experiences. As long as it's contaminated experiences, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, they are in the nature of sufferings. They are in the nature of sufferings. And that is the problem, the struggle we have. How can there be sufferings, And that is why we are still samsara, because we haven't understood that as suffering, we're attached to them, and therefore we haven't still got out of there. That is where the Buddha, when you talk of the suffering, first truth, suffering, the nature of suffering, he doesn't have to point all the different, the suffering of pain that we mentioned before. This is the nature of suffering. Even without him pointing that, we understand the suffering, pain, and we try to avoid it. But it is this kind of the suffering, the contaminated pleasures. Buddha saying, even that one, the pleasure that you think is the happiness, that you aspire, that you wish, that you want to achieve, even that is a suffering because it's contaminated. Because of that, true nature, that is in true nature, is not true happiness. In nature is suffering. It is like, bitter medicine that's coated by sweet. Bitter medicine coated by sweet. If when you start at the very beginning, when you take it, it feels sweet. But the nature of that real medicine is not the sweetness, it's the bitterness. Then you will experience the bitterness later once you go over the sweetness. So that medicine that heals you, the nature of that medicine is that bitter, the taste of that bitterness has, the sweetness is just coated. Those happiness are like that. The contaminated happiness are like that. If that nature of that medicine was really bitter, but you coat it with a sweetness, if its nature is sweet, then even after you dissolve the sweetness, still until you dissolve everything, it should be sweet. But after some time, it becomes bitter when it comes to the actual medicine. If it is really sweet in nature, then it should be always, all the time, until all the time. Same way, if happiness, that we think happiness, true happiness at the moment, if they are in the nature of true happiness, the more you experience that, more happiness you have to increase. The more joy it has to give you. Is that the case or not? If you contemplate. It's not. It's not. You know, when I've been running, hiking, walking for a long time, when you feel a little tired, you want to just sit, rest. And when you are able to take a place where you can rest, sit a little bit, it gives you some kind of relief, joy, and happiness. But that is not true happiness. The nature of true happiness and joyness. If you keep on sitting there for all the time, will it give you that joyness? No. It doesn't give you any more joy. You know? If that is the truth, by sitting, that you felt the joy and relief, whatever you felt, rested, if the true nature of the happiness, the more, even you stay there for 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 or 6 hours, you should continue to have that same happy feelings. But after some time, you feel like I have to get up. My body's hurting. My body is hurting. There's no more same joy feeling that I had before by sitting there for quite a while now. So Lama Tsongkhapa said, the reason why you feel joy in that moment, not because it's really joy, but because you are suffering of having walked so much and so much tired. So when there is that bit of rest from that, it feels like joy, but is in nature is not joy compared to that tiredness. It's like two suffering. One is light and one is very intense. When that intense suffering reduces, and when you have that light suffering, you feel it is joy. Do you get it? That is how he explained. And it is, if you really think about it, it makes sense.
So, in the morning, I do a gratitude meditation. And in that gratitude meditation, I'm grateful for the new day. And I'm grateful for the birds in the life and stuff like that. Is that contaminated?
So here the caution is, in the morning she thinks of gratitude for, so that is the problem. If I have to repeat, gratitude for life, gratitude for bird singing or being alive, whatever, is that contaminated? Not necessarily, it depends. What is contaminated or not contaminated from the Buddhist point of view, whatever experience, whatever result, if it's a result of the delusion and the contaminated karma, that's what regards the contaminated. If it is not the result of that, then it is not contaminated. That is what is in Buddhist terms, how we use at this point, what is contaminated. Of course, when we talk about contaminated, not contaminated, sometimes it depends on the context, because the word can be used indifferently. But here, at this point, when we talk about contaminated experience, we are talking about the experiences that we are experiencing are result of still the delusions, such as ignorance, rooted still in ignorance, and the karma that is created by contaminated karma. So that is what. So it is hard for anyone to say it's contaminated, or it depends on individuals, because I cannot say your experience is result of your delusions or not, because it could be result of your delusion, it could be result of your wisdom, so I cannot say, I cannot read your mind, but that is the kind of how we say it's contaminated, not in these cases. Okay, that is one thing. And we're talking about, the point was whether that experience is true happiness or not. That is the key. You know, if it's a true happiness, the more you enjoy, the more happiness it has to produce. But when you try to enjoy that, and after some time it cannot produce you any more joyfulness, instead it lead to, you know, disappointment, or instead it lead to a pain and suffering. It means it's not true. Its nature is not true happiness. It's clear. It's just like that coated bitter. You finish that coated one, and now you started to experience the bitter one. That is what the true nature of that was. So that is what it is saying, you know. And if we see that it's so, you know, when it's too hot, we get in cold places, it fills you with joyfulness, and you stay a long time and it gets cold, you know, then you have to put that, you know, and then after like that, again, you started to feel heat, and then again, you have to put that, you know, and then you have to go where the sun is, you know, find the sun, and then you stay in the sun. After 10-15 minutes, then you have to find shade. So whatever you find little happiness, joy at the very beginning, when you are too cold and finding the warmth and staying in the warmth, when it's too hot, finding a shade and finding some cool. Even though those are some kind of experience we feel happiness, joy, small kind of joy, that pleasure that we think. But here is saying the true nature of those experiences, not true happiness. If they are in nature of true happiness, the more you sit in the shade, it should continue to give you same happiness all the time. But after some time, it doesn't give you same feelings. When it's too cold, when you go find the sun, and when it's warm, that feeling of joy at that moment, the pleasant feeling, pleasure you get, if there is a true nature of happiness, if you stay in that sun and warm for a long time, it should continue to give you that pleasures all the time. But after some time, it doesn't give you any more pleasure. Same with eating, drinking, traveling. If you keep on traveling, after some time you get tired. At the very beginning, it's joyful. After, it becomes too tiring. Same with hygiene, you know. After a few days, you think you want to be home and have a nice bed, you know. So everything's like, you continue at the very beginning, there is some kind of excitement, there's some kind of joy, there's some kind of pleasure. And after some time, that feeling is gone. It doesn't sustain. It doesn't give that continuity by doing that same thing. It doesn't give the same. If it is in the true, if it is the nature of true happiness, the point, the reasoning and logics, the argument, if it's true happiness, the more you continue to do it, it should continue to give the same experience. If it doesn't give that, then it's a clear sign it's not true happiness. If it's not true happiness, because after some time, then you get disappointment and you are not happy by doing the same things. And all of that, then it is saying the true nature of is that actually suffering. If it's true suffering, then why is that we have that feeling of pleasant, joyful, good feeling at the very beginning for certain moments? So it's like that coated sweet or the bitter medicine. The true nature of that medicine is bitter taste, not the sweet taste. So that is the suffering will change. So isn't it still we struggle to that. I think when we talk intellectually like this, oh, it makes sense. But in our everyday experiences, still you're attached to those feelings. Still, we are running after those feelings. We are still attached to those experiences. We are still running after those experiences. Why is that? That means we have not truly understood. Oh, that means we have not truly understood. That means we have not truly understood the true nature of the sufferings still. We are still stuck in the first noble truth. That shows we have a long way to go, even though sometimes we feel we have studied so much, even though we feel sometimes we have practiced meditating so much. But what our experience says is we are still at the very beginning stages. We have still not really fully identified the nature of sufferings, fully, deeply, you know. And then the suffering of the third type of the sufferings is called all compounding or compounding pervasive sufferings. And that is even more difficult to identify, recognize, and understand the nature of suffering the most. And it is called all pervasive suffering because that kind of suffering is pervaded in all six realms. Suffering or pain does not pervade in all six realms and all the time. Sometimes we have suffering or pain, but we don't have suffering or pain all the time, isn't it? In our life, there are certain times when things are tough, sometimes with physical, sometimes with other things. But then there are times in our life when we feel everything is just perfect, it's just fine, isn't it? Good health, everything seems going well, we don't seem to have any problems. Oh, why people complain about life? Why does Buddha say life is suffering? I don't understand that. You know, why does Buddhists talk about suffering all the time? I don't understand that. My life seems to indicate differently. Everything seems just fine. Why is everyone, you know? So at those times, because we have temporary relief from the suffering and pain, but even in that time, we continue to experience the suffering of pervasive. That means even in that time, we are not free from the contaminated karma and the delusions. Yeah. Even when you are feeling all is great and fine in your life, you still have maybe anger. Maybe it's not manifesting sometimes strongly, but still there. You still have ignorance. You still have desires, jealousy, all of that. And even your aggregate is a result of the first contaminated karma and the delusions to begin with, and you are not free from the
Lauren's mic is on again.
but sometimes you should be able to do from okay. No, it is no, John, I already did. So our pervasive suffering. So even in that, when everything seems fine, still we are not free from the contaminated karma and delusions. And that is what called that when your existence or your rebirth or when your life is the under the control of karma and delusion, that itself is suffering. And that suffering is pervasive in all six realms and all the time. Even in some of the God realms, where they don't have suffering like us human beings. Some God realms, they don't have suffering. Not only this, they don't have suffering and pain, they don't have even suffering change. If they don't have those suffering, how can be they sufferings? How can they be sentient beings? Because they are still not free from the third type of the suffering all pervasive. Still those God are not free from the delusion and the karma. And so when we think, how is that suffering? Do you know? How, when you are not free from the delusion and karma, how is that suffering? But we have to remember, suffering doesn't always mean the pain, obvious pain that we are referring to. Okay, let me give you an example. There could be three different level of prisons, depending on the level of crime. Some, there can be a punishment, even tortures, sometimes very small cells, sometimes without even light, without window, for certain very hardcore criminals. And sometimes they might be doing a lot of torture to investigate, interrogate, and all of that. That is obvious pain and sufferance, Then there is another level of prison where they have much more bigger, house, where they have windows, lights, and they don't get such tortures and like that, but they have less freedom, That is much more better than the first one, but it's still prison. Being in that prison is a suffering. Nobody wants to be in that state, And then third level is almost like house arrest. Do you get it? House arrest. You have your compound. You can do anything you do within your compound, everything, but then you are not allowed to meet your families, friends. You are not allowed to communicate with others. You are not allowed to go here, there. Let's say house arrest. It's much more better than being in that prison, but it still is another form of prison. Do you get it? Even that, nobody wants to be in house arrest. So in that house arrest, why is that suffering? Why is prison? Why is suffering? Because that person does not have the freedom to go out, come, freedom to see who they want to see, freedom to meet their families, friends, freedom to do what they want to do. When you lose all this freedom, isn't that a suffering? Yeah, we can understand that is suffering. Same thing here. We have lost our freedom to karma and the delusions. We are the prisoner of karma and the delusions. We are the slave of karma and the delusions. That is suffering. How is that? I don't want to get angry, but I cannot stop getting angry when certain cause and condition comes. That means I have no control. I don't want to have too much desire. And I try, but sometimes I cannot stop. Certain cause and condition arises, then desire arises. If I control, that shouldn't happen because this is something that I don't want to be. And I'm putting effort not to be in that, despite that. So that means I haven't gained control over those emotions, ignorance, all of that. So, I don't want to get sick. But when karma arrives and when certain external cause and condition come, then I get sick. I make mistake that I shouldn't make mistake. Something that normally you wouldn't do that, you do something, silly things, mistake things. And due to that, that karma writing together, and then you get sick, for example. So again, if we have control of karma, we shouldn't be experiencing that. That is something we don't want to experience, and all of that. And so therefore, that is what all pervasive is. When it's called all pervasive because it pervades in all 6 realms, and it's a suffering in sense that you don't have control at this point over your own karma and delusion. Instead, it's the karma and delusion that's controlling you. It is the you have become the slave or prisoner of karma and delusions. And that is the 3rd level of sufferings. At the moment, again, we don't understand that as a sufferings. So through meditating on the nature of suffering in that way, such as those 3 different type of sufferings, and then you understand, as long as I'm in samsara, doesn't matter which realms, doesn't matter what kind of life you have, whether you are, wealthy or whether you are poor, whether you are educated, uneducated, whether you have chronic illness or whether you don't have any chronic illness, regardless of whether you are Eastern, Western, regardless of what spiritual path you believe in, political things you believe in, not believe in, it doesn't matter as long as you are in samsara. We all are in the same boat, experiencing the sufferings. As long as you are samsara, as anyone who is in samsara, we all are experiencing some level of suffering. At least one type of those suffering all the times. So when you understand that, then you might feel so sense of tired of being in that samsara. Do you get it? Tired of being in samsara. When you feel you're tired of being in samsara, then you really develop the wish to get out of that samsara. At the moment, we don't feel that way. We don't have the wish to get out of samsara. We don't feel we feel too comfortable in samsara. We feel too comfortable in samsara. It's like we don't want to be in the first level of prison, but we are okay with this house being in house arrest. We're comfortable with that. Until you understand even this one, even being how honest, even though I can do all this here, but with the limitations, all of that, getting tired of that. I want to get out of here. I want to get out of here. Feeling tired and getting out of that. When you truly understand, then you really, from the depth of your heart, you really feel it doesn't matter what, where, and what. As long as samsara is a suffering, there's no end to suffering. Therefore, there's no end. It's a tiring. I want to get out of that samsara. I want to free myself from out of that samsara. So when you develop that strong wish, that strong aspirations to free yourself, to get out of that samsara from depth of your heart, That is what the renunciation is. You have understood samsara is a sufferance, never-ending sufferance. Samsara is sufferings. And so the only way to free from samsara permanently is get out of them. And so that's the renunciation. So I think we will stop here today. So we do it maybe, okay? I don't want to take too much caution here because John also need to drive to Santa Fe as me, and we are already over a little bit of time today. So, but if I can take that one, yeah.
Oh, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in getting rid of samsara?
I'm still stuck in samsara, just like you, if you are stuck. So that is why I can explain what it is like to be in samsara because I'm in there. I cannot explain what experience is getting out of samsara. That experience I don't have. I can only imagine, and I can only describe according to the scriptures. In terms of that experience, I can only explain about the delusions and the disappointment and the suffering and the pain of the samsara. So, which I described today. Okay, so we do the dedications. Today we can do shorter dedications.
Should I still read the list?
Yeah, depending on, yeah, we can list, especially list is not long.
Jana, Mary Jo, Katie, Joe T. Victims of violence, Stella. And bones broken. For illness, Yeshi the dog, Jim B, John B, Lisa Pacheco, Patty Bill, Brian, Allie, Rolf, and Debbie. Those who are dying or have died in the last 49 days, Jeanette A, Carol McCall, Robert, Patty Ann, Eric, Aileen, and mosquitoes. We'll do our dedication prayers in Tibet. Gewadi.
So, do some when so send to the
Only prayer for his holiness Dalai Lama. The wish granted is wish fulfillment to all souls. I receive. Prayer for the still return of Lama Zopa. Peerless teacher, the children of the different. Slow son.
All these, I think the precious and complete teachings through explanation. You patience, certainly discovered incomparable being to you. This is something saying pointedly for the sake of teaching the soul together with through it. It's certainly the peace, what are good is the bottom is the undiscerning truth. Of the individual And the girl for the cheetah, the children and the victims. May the citizen plain time swiftly made for the medicine. Thank you, thank you. So for those of you, if you have questions,